Good evening, everybody. We want to thank you for joining us once again on AHA Clinic's Lab Academy. You know that we are given to human development and or human resource development, and we bring in these webinars every month. You know, we go around to get some seasoned professionals who have distinguished themselves and we know will add value to what we do, and we bring them here. Tonight, I have I'm proud to be introducing my very big father as far as medical laboratory sciences in relation to malaria microscopy is concerned. In fact, I know some people said they joined this webinar because they know the name Mr. Bamiro. I think he is almost synonymous with malaria diagnosis in Nigeria. If you know anything about malaria diagnosis, there's something called WHO certification, which is an international certification that is done in Kenya. Mr. Bamiro has had the privilege to be certified 3 times level 1. Now, I think he will explain fully what it means to be level 1 and level 2 and level 3. But if you know anything about WHO diagnosis of malaria, you know that you have detection, speciation, and parasite density. So to be a level 1, you should score over 90% in detection, over 90% in speciation, and over 50% in parasite density. And 3 times in a row, Mr. Bamiro, sorry, sir?
4 times.
4 times, wow. So 4 times in a row, Mr. Bamiro has maintained that standard. He is well sought after by a lot of NGOs to do a lot of malaria intervention programs in various parts of the country. He has helped a lot. It looks like everybody who has become certified as far as malaria microscopy in Nigeria, mainly, and perhaps other parts of the world, have had a link with Mr. Jide Bamiro. As a matter of fact, I had the privilege of seeing him this week, and he was holding a malaria training in the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria. I think we should really appreciate the value Mr. Jide brings to us this evening. His itinerary is usually very full, but he has obliged us the opportunity. I think because training seems to be what he does normally every time, and he has chosen to, grant us this privilege to share with us one of those things that we can do to contribute our own quota as medical laboratory scientists and professionals in this drive, and fight against malaria, coming to a 0 level of malaria. So, Mr. Jide, I'm really happy to have you here. Good evening, sir. You're welcome to AHA Clinic's Lab Academy.
Thank you very much, Obina. I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad that I'm going to share my lot of experience in the area of malaria microscopy competence this evening.
All right. Thank you, sir. So my people, so we're going to do it. You remember our ground rules. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer slot included. And let's give Mr. Bamiro about the next 1 hour to share with us. And I know, sir, that there will be a lot of questions. People want to build a career in this thing and not just successfully detect malaria on the bench. So you help us handle all of this. So let me share my screen so that we can have the presentation. So we have the screen, all right?
Yes.
Hello, sir, can you see the screen fully?
Yes, I can see the screen fully.
Okay, so Mr. Bamiro, please, the floor is yours. Carry on, sir.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be here this evening. And I'll be talking on malaria microscopy competence as the panacea to malaria burden, elimination, and eradication. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is the overview of the presentation. We'll be talking about historical background of malaria, the nomenclature of malaria, World malaria body, malaria microscopy incompetence as a result of doctoral problems. We're looking at consequences of malaria microscopy incompetence. We'll talk about presumptive diagnosis, how it has destroyed, helped in destroying malaria microscopy skill. WHO national recommendation of malaria diagnosis, malaria case management goal, malaria microscopy certification, ICAR and NCAM, why malaria microscopy competence, and I will be concluding with a closing message. Next slide. Now, so there is an historical background before that slide. Yes, okay. So let's look at the historical background of malaria. Malaria evolved from tropical Africa some 2.5 million to 3 million years ago. And Plasmodium falciparum, which is the most dangerous of the 5 Plasmodium species, believed to have originated as a cross-species transmission from gorillas, while P. vivax was from ancestral stock of parasites also from gorilla and chimpanzee. It is thought that malaria began to travel out of Africa about 3,000 years ago, hastened by wars and import of human labor, especially during slave trade. Evidence that malaria is an ancient disease was documented in the ancient Chinese document 2700 BC in clay tablet from the Mesopotamia from about 2000 BC, and even in the Egyptian papyri from 1000 BC and Hindu text 600 BC. And the first evidence of malaria disease in the modern world began to surface in the mid-18th century in medieval Italy. Next slide, please. Now let's look at that word malaria, that nomenclature malaria. The name is derived from Italian vocabulary, mal, which means bad, aria, which means air. So it was believed in Italy that malaria disease actually is gotten from foul or bad air, especially from marshy or swampy area believed to favor vector breeding. And the malaria parasite is a protozoal infection caused by 5 Plasmodium species that infect man, namely P. falciparum, P. vivax, P. malaria, P. ovale. And P. nocii, which is the last of being discovered in Southeast Asia. So 3 of these species can be found in Nigeria: P. falciparum, P. vivax, P. falciparum, P. malaria, and P. ovale. The 4th species of PV has been documented in Nigeria molecularly. However, it has not been documented microscopically. And P. nocii, as I said, actually emerged from Southeast Asia. Next slide. How do you get malaria? The vector for malaria is a female Anopheles mosquito, and there are about 460 species of female Anopheles mosquito that is recognized, but only about 100 can transmit human malaria. However, only 30 to 40 species commonly transmit Plasmodium to man. Transmission is by through the bite of an infected female Anopheles mosquito. And responsible Anopheles are Anopheles funestus, Anopheles gambiense, Anopheles arabescens, Anopheles melas, with the latest one being Anopheles stevensi. And in the nearest future, it is believed that stevensi, which is an insecticide-resistant vector, Anopheles vector, may be causing damage in the urban area if care is not taken and proper measures is not taken against this particular species. It is an insecticide-resistant species that is bound to cause havoc in the urban area. When you are bitten by the mosquito injects sporozoids into a man, and the sporozoids begin to multiply. And as sporozoids multiply, get into the liver, multiply, and begin to go through the cycle, man will become sick with the symptoms of malaria, such as high fever, headache, severe chills, rigor, profuse sweating, and general body pain. Next slide. This is the life cycle of Plasmodium species. And if you look at this diagram, the mosquito will bite the man. The mosquito will find its way within 30 minutes of the sporozoid entering the human body, find its way to the corpuscles of the liver. In the liver, the sporozoid will begin to multiply and eventually form a schizont. The schizont will get matured and rupture and release merozoid, and that phase is called exoerythrocytic cycle because it's a cycle that is happening outside the red cell. Now the merozoids released will get attached to a fresh red cell, and the cycle begins again. And with this process, schizont will continue to be formed, and of course, the schizont will eventually rupture. And in this process, rupturing the red cell, and this is actually responsible for anemia that you find in patients with malaria. However, some of the merozoids, when they get to the immature stage, instead of them to get matured, they would differentiate into gametocyte. And the gametocyte is what a mosquito will actually take in during the time a man is eating again. They will take up this gametocyte. And this gametocyte, when they get into the gut of the mosquito, the male and the female will fuse to form a zygote. The zygote will develop a motility tendency, and at that stage it's called eukinete. And this eukinete will find itself into the gut wall of the mosquito and now develop into an oocyst with a lot of sporocysts inside the oocyst. When these oocysts get matured, then the oocyst also will get ruptured, releasing sporozoids. And this sporozoid will now migrate to the salivary gland of the mosquito and ready to bite a man. At this stage, it is said that that mosquito is infected. So this particular cycle, whereby the mosquito take in the sexual forms, the gametocyte of the parasite, is called sporogory. And this actually happens in the mosquito. So that is just a summary of the process by which the mosquito actually bites man and infects man with malaria. Next slide. Now let us look at, before we can appreciate the havoc malaria does to mankind, let's look at the world malaria burden. Half of the world population, which is about 4 million, lives in malaria risk region. In 2021, the World Malaria Report recorded 247 million cases of malaria with 619,000 deaths in 84 countries. 29 countries actually accounted for 96% of malaria cases globally, and 4 countries, including Nigeria, actually accounts for almost half of this burden. The World Health Organization Afro-Regional region actually is responsible for 95% of the global burden of malaria, and that translates into 234 million cases in 2021. And 96% of the global malaria deaths also happens in sub-Saharan region, which is also the WHO Afro region, which is in Africa. And as a matter of fact, I want to say that this burden actually has been halved, because the slogan before is that every 30 minutes, a child dies. Every 30 seconds, rather, a child dies. But now the slogan is every 1 minute, a child dies. That is to say that the global burden of malaria actually has been halved. So the Afro region of WHO actually leads on the number of deaths due to malaria, also with 4 countries accounting for the global malaria deaths. And Nigeria is responsible for 31% of this. DC Congo 13%, Niger 4%, United Congo, Tanzania 4%. And as regards global burden, Nigeria actually accounts for a little over 1/4 of the global burden, which is 27%. Next slide. Now, when we look at the Nigerian burden of 27%, that translates into 67 million in just a year, 2021. And for mortality, death, 31% translates into 192,000 deaths just in 2021 alone. And this death is 60 times more than what COVID killed in Nigeria in 3 years. And as a matter of fact, I want to say that in Nigeria, 22 children die of malaria every hour. So with this figures, detection of malaria parasites by quality assured microscopy, followed by prompt and effective case management, is very, very crucial for reducing malaria morbidity and mortality. Because if the microscopist is not competent, more children will continue to die. Malaria death and malaria burden will continue to rise. And that is one of the things that presumptive treatment also did to the world. Presumptive treatment is when the doctors look at the patient using clinical signs and symptoms to diagnose malaria. And over the years, presumptive treatment actually has failed the world. And because it has failed the world, it has, as a matter of fact, put selective pressure on the former anti-malaria. And the fear now is that the wonder drug, which is artemisinin, we're afraid that we should not get the parasite getting resistance to the present drug. Artemisinin resistance actually has started from Southeast Asia. It has now been documented in Rwanda, in Ghana, Uganda, Angola, DRC, and also in Burkina Faso. So because of this, we need to put an end to presumptive diagnosis and presumptive treatment and make sure that competent malaria microscopists do the diagnosis, and of course, we know what we are treating. Next slide. This is a map of Nigeria. This map was taken from the report of the National Malaria Diagnosis of 2021. If you look at the map, the prevalence for each of the states actually was captured in this map. And you can see that the northwestern part of the country, Sokoto, Kebbi, especially Kebbi, had the highest prevalence, followed by Zamfara and Sokoto, where Kwara had the least prevalence. So this can actually just give you an overview of what is happening, the prevalence of malaria all over the states of Nigeria. Next slide. Now the big question, with this magnitude of burden, with this magnitude of death, with this magnitude of manpower lost to malaria, with this magnitude of anguish and suffering parents go through in making sure that they rescue their children from malaria, what other scientific proven strategy do we need to augment other preventive strategy in the case management of malaria? What we need is a parasitological diagnosis. Malaria microscopy remains the gold standard, but I will also say that no, malaria microscopy will continue to be the gold standard only in the hands of a quality assured microscopy. A quality assured microscopy is a competent microscopy and one that has passed malaria certification. Next slide. Now, I want to I want to actually talk on malaria microscopy incompetence and what havoc malaria microscopy incompetence has done to the world. And if you could remember vividly, in the time of chloroquine was so cheap. And because chloroquine was so cheap, doctor discarded texting and started using presumptive diagnosis and presumptive treatment. And because it is cheaper for you to actually give the drug, do the treatment, than for you to actually do the diagnosis. During this time, we begin to lose the skill. And because we lost the skill, subsequent trials in trying to bring remedy to the world, especially in some of the anti-malaria treatment and some of antibacterial treatment, we started having problems. And we're going to highlight some of those problems. In 1993, there was four drug trial in East Africa. In 1994, there was this mefloquine versus doxycycline trial. In 1995, azithromycin study trial. In 1995 again, there was another challenge study in Washington, drug study in West Africa in 1998, in East Africa in 2000. And by the year 2000, when malaria RDT begins to emerge, we need something to compare the efficacy of RDT. And of course, what comes to mind is to use malaria microscopy. And so we had that trial in 2000. There was another treatment trial in Asia in 2004, and there are many more. But for all these trials, microscopists that are incompetent actually messed all this trial up. And we begin to look at those trials one after the other. Next slide. This is a trial of protective efficacy of mefloquine. Mefloquine actually was used as a control arm drug in this particular drug of vaccine trial. And of course, we do know that mefloquine have greater than 95% protective efficacy. False positives because of incompetent microscopy impacts on the estimate of the protective efficacy of even mefloquine. As a matter of fact, the outcome of that research says that mefloquine efficacy actually was 1%. And of course, the researchers knew that something was wrong and they began investigating, only to find out that there were a lot of false positive, which impact negatively on the outcome of that result or of that study. Next slide. This is another prophylaxis trial. Mefloquine was also used as a control arm in 2000. You can also see that because of false positivity, as a matter of fact, mefloquine as a control arm actually was clearing the malaria, but false positivity reduced the protective efficacy of mefloquine to 1%. In that study, nearly everyone actually was treated because of false positivity. And when investigation was done, it was found that there was serious false positive problem. And by the time the slides were read by expert microscopists, it was found out that mefloquine actually have greater than 95% protective efficacy. Next slide. This is another trial, mefloquine versus doxycycline. Doxycycline we know has anti-malaria activity as well. And this trial was done in 1993 in Indonesia. There was false positive problem, there was false negative problem, and that also ruined that particular study. Incompetent microscopists. Next slide. treatment trial with sulfadoxine pyrimethamine also was ruined by an incompetent microscopist. Next slide. Now, so what are the consequences of malaria microscopy incompetence, as I've highlighted? This is just a summary. An incompetent microscopy will accidentally kill a good drug, just like what we see in most of those trials. We accidentally kill a good vaccine. As a matter of fact, the RTSS vaccine and the R21 vaccine that was just those two vaccines that have been approved for use in Nigeria and Ghana would not have been there today if those trials were done by incompetent microscopists. As an incompetent microscopist, you can even license water as drug into the market, because less efficacious drug will get access. A less efficacious drug that is as useless as water can get access into the market and begin to have serious adverse effects, killing people because of what? Incompetent microscopy. There may be a need to repeat a trial. And especially, we know how clinical trial is always very, very expensive. Clinical trial always run into millions of dollars. So incompetent microscopy can cause so much waste in millions of dollars to study trial. There will also be difficulty in understanding published data. The principal investigator will be caused so much embarrassment that it will be blacklisted. Our children and pregnant women that are vulnerable to malaria will just be killed unnecessarily. Resources will be wasted unnecessarily. Patients that are supposed to undergo the right treatment will not get that right treatment. There will be prolonged suffering due to the causative agent of that particular disease not being taken care of. And of course, in false positive cases where we give drugs that are not necessary, that are not needed, this may precipitate selective pressure and precipitate resistance. Remember, we need to be careful because we are beginning to have partial resistance to a wonder drug, artemisinin, and that resistance is already with us in Africa. Next slide. Now, I want us to just, this is an old study, and actually this old study actually emphasized on overdiagnosis, the magnitude of havoc of overdiagnosis and overtreatment, either as a result of using presumptive diagnosis or as a result of a competent microscopist. So there was systematical review of 24 studies conducted between 1989 and 2005 in 15 different African countries that has 15,331 patients. The proportion of malaria among fever was highly variable between 2% to 81%. This study actually highlighted that out of every 100 patients, only 26 actually had malaria. And that is why doctors must have to stop presumptive treatment. Presumptive diagnosis also must have to be stopped. And also, use of incompetent microscopists also must have to be stopped so that we can embrace competency. Before 2000, it was 36%. Between 2000 and 2005, it was 19% that are actually responsible for malaria. So we can also see the magnitude of resources that were wasted because of overdiagnosis and over-treatment. Next slide. Now, I'm bringing these slides also to highlight the proportion of patients diagnosed with having malaria when the microscopy were negative. And this is highlighted, and if you look at in Nigeria, out of 1,284 patients, it was found that 788 of such patients actually have negative microscopy. Negative microscopy, I mean by extract, 57% is what we have in Nigeria. And this was actually as high as 85% in some countries like Malawi, 72%, 73% in some countries like Thailand and also Zimbabwe. So we can, at the right hand part of that screen, so we can see the percentage of overestimation by clinical diagnosis. Next slide. Now the question is, how, why, what happened? How did we get ourselves to this level of incompetence? Why did we allow this to happen? What beclouded us? Let me remind us, the advent of miracle drug, chloroquine, that was so cheap. Chloroquine was just not an anti-malaria. It was also an analgesic. It was also an antiprotozoa. So chloroquine came as a wonder drug. Doctors forgot texting, embraced presumptive diagnosis, which was treatment based on signs and symptoms. And by the late 90s and early 2000s, malaria prevailed over chloroquine. Chloroquine now became resistant. And we're so lucky that at that time, another miracle drug was discovered, which was artemisinin. We lost chloroquine to presumptive diagnosis. We also lost chloroquine because during that period between the 80s and the 90s, when chloroquine prevailed, we also lost our skill. There was no place where you can get malaria microscopy training done. And of course, by the time new drugs were coming in and needed, to be tried, because we have lost the skill, then the malaria microscopists were recording false positive and false negative. And at that time, the world was upside down. Then the experts in 2005 had to gather in Kuala Lumpur to deliberate on all these issues of incompetence of malaria microscopists. And at that time also, everybody was just imagining, we need the skill of competent microscopists to actually know whether the RDT will be actually useful as a case management tool. So it was the Kuala Lumpur meeting that came to the rescue. And at that time, in Africa, the Center of Excellence for Malaria Microscopy in Kisumu was not established just a year before the Kuala Lumpur meeting, because they were proactive and they were actually seeing into the future. And of course, that center now became the hub in Africa, where the WHO TDGRAM will send every microscopy in Africa to that was opportune to key into that program And that actually began the radical change of malaria microscopy. And it was in that meeting that the model for competency assessment was also agreed that it should be formalized. The Asian continent actually were ahead of the African continent. They have actually started their core competence assessment using an organization called ACT Malaria to actually power malaria microscopy training and their malaria microscopy competence activity. So, but in that Kuala Lumpur meeting, WHO decided that yes, it's going to adopt it, but for the meantime, let the ACT Malaria continue to conduct the competency program. It was adopted in Asia, and for Africa, by 2009, the competence program actually started in Africa. Next slide. And this is just highlighting presumptive diagnosis. The presumptive diagnosis actually has failed us. That recognizing malaria may no longer be easy as looking and touching the patient, using clinical signs and symptoms, that we need to do more. Next slide. And this study actually was done in Ifakara in Dar es Salaam. And this study actually investigated the causes of fever in children in urban Dar es Salaam and rural Ifakara, that was in Tanzania. And it was found that there are several infections and diseases that could cause fever. And malaria is just one of the many fever-causing agents. And this is what I'm trying to highlight in this slide. Next slide. And because malaria is just one of a lot of causes of fever, and by the mere fact that WHO actually decided that this is not the time to actually intervene and begin to put measures in place to bring back quality into malaria diagnosis, especially malaria microscopy. So I think by 2009, the WHO came out with this recommendation that every fever must be confirmed by parasitological diagnosis, either by microscopy or by RDT. And this particular decision stemmed from the fact that WHO actually had the opportunity of testing the usefulness actually of competency between 2005 and 2009, and actually now realize that the right thing to do and the right thing to follow is to actually know what we are treating, so that we can actually prevent resistance, especially to a new drug, which is artemisinin, which we now use in combination. Next slide. Also, WHO follow it with this recommendation that when the patient is, we call it the 3 T's, that every suspected malaria case should be confirmed by microscopy or RDT. And when you do a test, you must do a test before you treat. When you now treat your patient, you must track your patient to make sure that your patient is well. And also, that will also give you or give us the opportunity to be able to track resistance as well, if at all resistance also is developing, or if at all our diagnostic tool is also failing us, especially, and that has to do with RDT, because there are some biological phenomenon actually that will make RDT to fail, and one of them is histidine-rich protein 2 deletions in malaria parasites, and that was actually what this particular recommendation is all about. That you should test countries and you should track the patient to make sure that yes, there is parasite clearance, and if there is parasite resistance, then you cannot change the treatment plan. Next slide. So after the WHO recommendation in 2009, by 2011, Nigeria also followed that policy recommendation that every fever must have to be confirmed by parasitological diagnosis. And I would say that since then, I think things are beginning to change, which I will highlight later in some other slides. Next slide. Now, what is malaria case management goal? The overall public health goal is the reduction of the infectious reservoir. Specifically, early detection and prompt effective treatment to cure the infection and prevent progression to severe malaria, especially because we are talking about malaria. Proper management of severe malaria to prevent death. Prevention of onset of drug resistance so that the fate of chloroquine will not also now be the fate of our artemisinin combination therapy, and the reduction of malaria transmission using vector control mechanism. Next slide. And the National Malaria Elimination Program of the Federal Ministry of Health, also in a bid to reduce malaria morbidity and mortality, decided to scale up towards a malaria-free Nigeria. Next slide. And they decided to adopt scale up for impact strategy, which now focuses on the entire population at risk rather than vulnerable population. All cases of suspected malaria must be tested, treated, and tracked. And for you to test, to be able to treat, and to be able to track, you need a competent malaria microscopist to do that for you. Next slide. Now, how to avoid microscopy incompetence? A microscopist or a laboratory professional must be trained and must be retrained, must have the right education, and must be able to assess assessment leading to certification. And there are two types of assessment that is presently available. There is the external competency assessment of malaria microscopists that is being organized and coordinated by WHO. And there is also national competence assessment for malaria microscopists in Nigeria that is being actually coordinated by the National Malaria Elimination Program of the Federal Ministry of Health and the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria. The NCAM certification is actually the national platform by which a competent microscopist actually can be certified. The ECAM certification actually is meant for the national core group of malaria microscopists. And I will be talking about the national core group of malaria microscopy later, because it is the national core group actually that drives the country income. And for us to also avoid incompetence, there is need for us to put our malaria microscopy internal QC into place. And also, it's also important to have our quarterly malaria microscopy EQA. Next slide. Why malaria microscopy competence? For case management of malaria, every fever must be confirmed. And as I told us earlier, that microscopy is only a gold standard in the hand of a competent microscopist. Microscopy is only a gold standard in the hands of a quality assured microscopist. And the only scientific way for us to demonstrate competence is for us to be certified in a proper certification program. There are several things that malaria microscopy competence will help us in achieve, apart from the malaria case management. In epidemiological study, we need to understand the trend of the diverse species of malaria parasite that is available, especially in that locality, because some of us know that there are some certain species of Plasmodium that actually do form hypnozoites. And some of these Plasmodium actually may require that you use a gametocidal agent on them so that they will not cause relapse. In drug efficacy, you also need to monitor the first and second line of anti-malaria in every country so that you'll be able to actually track situations, especially track or monitor resistance. Remember, as I told us earlier, our water drug is beginning to have partial resistance, and this has been documented, as I told us, in Rwanda, in Ghana, it has been documented in Uganda, it has been documented in Eritrea, it has been documented in Angola, DRC, and also in Burkina Faso. And for us to make sure that these drugs continue to serve us well, we need to track the resistance so that policies can be put in place in order for us to save the drug from being useless so that it will not fall into the fate of chloroquine. Now, vaccines are coming up. How do you test the efficacy of a vaccine in a vaccine trial? You need a competent malaria microscopist. And as a matter of fact, WHO actually recommends that only certified level 1 and level 2 should actually partake in therapeutic efficacy study of anti-malaria. And that is the WHO recommendation. And for this reason, for us to be looking for further vaccines that will be able to alleviate the sufferings and that will be able to save our children and our pregnant women, we need to invest in malaria competence so that whatever study or whatever trial that we need to do actually will be properly done, and the outcome actually will be the best that will actually impact on our people and on our children and pregnant women. There is also the need to also continue to do quality assurance on RDT. Quality assurance of RDT is done with specimen banking. In specimen banking, you prepare QC panel, and it is this QC panel at a particular threshold of parasitemia. That is how we quality assure RDT. and it's only a competent or an expert microscopist that does that. For field trial and evaluation of RDTs, we need competent microscopists. For evaluation of other malaria diagnostics tools, in quality assurance, especially in proficiency testing that will require slide banking. In slide banking, you need to know the type of malaria parasite in that slide. You also need to make sure that things are done rightly for you to be able to impact positively on malaria microscopists. And the only way that can be done is to have competent microscopists actually doing all this activity. Next slide. Now I've been talking about competency. And I think we need to know how competence actually evolve. I've actually talked about it a little bit, but what I just need to let us know again, I just want to remind us again that serious issues that happened in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, especially in clinical trials of so many drugs, actually necessitated that that something needed to be done. And that meeting of experts, the original workshop for malaria microscopy that was held in Kuala Lumpur, actually was what came to the rescue. And in that meeting, it was formally agreed that competency templates should be refined. And ACT Malaria was asked to coordinate, of course, the network in WAPO and Syrio. As I told us earlier, they have actually started doing something because actually they foresaw, you understand, the doom ahead. And they actually have started working on it. And of course, they were allowed to, start coordinating it, especially in those two WHO regions. But now WHO has taken over it. And by 2009, WHO commenced this certification course in Africa. Hello? Hello?
Can hear you, Dr. Bamiro. Just a moment, please.
Okay. Now, while we're trying to sort out, the slide, there is this question. Please, from your experience, somebody is asking a question. Thanks a lot, sir. Please, from your experience, what can you say about the sensitivity of RDT available for use in Nigeria? Well, I want to categorically tell you that RDT is as good as expert microscopists. I'm part of the process of the WHO that started around 2005, 2006 to put sanity into RDT through product testing and lot testing. And yes, initially, before 2005, there are issues, serious issues with RDT. There are manufacturers' issues, and there are also user issues. But WHO came on board, set up specimen banking across all over the world. And one of such specimen banking was set up in Andy Center of Excellence in College of Medicine, University of Lagos, in which I'm a pioneer member. And it was actually from the grant of Andy that I was also trained to become an expert microscopist. I was actually pre-qualified. and specimen banking. Specimens were collected with level 1 malaria microscopies. Specimens were calibrated and they were used to do lot testing and also product testing. And also product testing for RDT. So I can now tell you that RDT we have now are very, very reliable. And most RDT that are supplied by programs, especially NMEP in Nigeria, actually go through what we call lot testing before they come into the country. When they also get into the country, they also go through the in-country lot testing. But, and I also want to say that it is better when you want to purchase RDT. There is a site for WHO pre-qualification of RDT. Visit that site. When you visit that site, hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, sir. You're on, sir.
Okay, so when you visit that site, you can see all the RDT that actually is pre-qualified. And I think once you see those RDT that are pre-qualified, you can now make your choice of what you want to buy. So, but if you now buy RDT that are not pre-qualified, I cannot guarantee RDT that are not qualified. But from my experience, generally, RDT are good, and they are as good as expert malaria microscopists.
Is the small one with that beside the printer icon. That 3 dots beside the printer icon. Yes.
Hello, sir. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Is this your preferred screen, sir?
Yeah, it's okay. I can see the screen clearly. Okay. But I think we need to go back.
Okay. Okay, I think this is where we were.
Yeah. Okay, so I was talking about, yeah, that's it. No. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. So this is, okay, it's all right. It's okay. Now, I was talking about ICAM. Now, so by 2009, WHO actually commenced ICAM in Africa. And by 2010, in the 4th course, I had the opportunity to be the first Nigerian actually that attended ICAM, and actually that actually changed my orientation completely. You would think you are the best until you attain a certification, and you will know that there are still lots that you need to know, and there are still lots that we need to do in programs, in country, in malaria diagnosis, for us to actually reap the benefits of being a competent microscopist. Now, I told you there are two forms of certification that is available. There is ICAM, that is NCAM. ICAM, according to the WHO recommendation, is recommended for the international core group of microscopists. I told you earlier, ICAM commenced in 2009 in the WHO Afro region, and the WHO recommends that once a country can boast of 10 to 12 level 1 and level 2 certified microscopists, such country can go ahead to establish a national competency assessment program, which will then be the official country certification program. And that is what the NCAM stands for. Next slide. Now, this is just a summary of the Nigerian participation in ICAM to date from 2010, where I was the sole participant. And and these are all the other ICAM. So to date, you can see in July 10, I was a sole participant. In November 2011, 2 courses of ICAM, WHO ICAM, were organized in Nigeria and was hosted by Andy. Nigeria presented 24 participants. Only 2 actually made level. Only 2 of them, only 2 persons made level 3. In 2014, USDOD and MOD Water Program, Nigeria presented 6 candidates. Out of the 6 candidates, only 2, 1 made level 2 and 1 made level 3. In August 2015, Andy Center of Excellence, which was an organization then, actually enrolled 5 microscopists from the center. And I was actually going for recertification. So I was part of the 3 that became level 1. 3 of us became level 1. 1 became level 2 and 1 level 3. 2016, Water Read program now came again the second time with funding coming from PMI, presented 12 participants, and all the 12 made it. 2 level 1, 9 level 2, and 1 level 3. And it goes on and goes on till July and November last year. I was part of the 5, and that will be my 4th attempt of retaining the level 1. I was part of the 5. We have 2 level 1, myself and 1 other lady. We have 3 level 2, and 1 level 1. So from 2010 till 2020, Nigeria actually was able to produce approximately about 39 to 40 level 1 and level 2. And with in 2020 alone, we had 15 level 1 and level 2. So I'm fulfilling the WHO criteria that at least 10 to 12, I will now have 40. So last year, Nigeria decided to now inaugurate a national core group. So I'll be talking about, so you can see till date, we've in 100 attempts, we had 22 level 1, 28 level 2, and 17 level 3. That means we had 34% failure. Level 4 is actually a failure. And we can also see that we have a lot of recertifying participants. As a matter of fact, we can see that in level 1, we have, out of the 22, 4 of the participants were for recertification. For level 2, 6 were for recertification, and for level 3, 2 were for recertification. So you can see the summary by the left-hand side that as of today, Nigeria has level 1, 17, level 2, 20, and level 3, 15. Next slide.
Hi. Oh, this thing.
Okay, this is just a picture of the last certification exercise I attended. That was that I became quadruple certified. Was June 27 to July 1, 2022. And here, 4 WHO regional offices all over the world were brought together. So this was for the best of the best in all the continents brought here together. And I was actually representing Nigeria here. And these are all level 1. Everybody here is level 1. But it was a recertification exercise, and it was unfortunate that 3 of the level 1 here actually dropped to level 3. So for you to maintain your competence, you must have to be up and doing, and you must have to be active doing malaria diagnosis. When you leave your malaria diagnosis, your competence leaves you. Next slide. In trying to set up the NCAM in Nigeria, we thought it was necessary for us to validate the Nigerian training, the Nigerian Malaria Microscopy training. And so we now decided to do an unofficial NCAM certification, a pre-NCAM certification. We actually presented 24 Nigerian in the global fund supported states, the best 24 malaria microscopists. And we chose these malaria microscopists according to performance in these 24 states. Now, by the time we did the unofficial NCAM certification for them, to have a baseline of what they are. Level 1, we had 5 level 1. We had 5 level 2, 7 level 3, and we have 7 level 4. But we decided to enroll those level 4. Yeah, although they did not meet the minimum requirement, but they are the best in their states. And those are the best we could lay our hands upon. And we needed to present 24 participants. So by the time they now sat for the WHO certification course, the level 1 that was 5 increased to 9. The level 2 that was 5 increased to 6. And of course, we had 6 level 3 because most of them actually have either become level 1 or level 2. And we only have 3 that was level 4. And actually, this actually now proves that the Nigerian training system standard is high, and that if you can score level 1 to 3 in Nigeria, if you go to write ECAM, and you go to write ECAM in WHO, you may even do better. And this actually validates that Nigerian training system is on course, and I was happy because I was one of the pioneers of the training program in Nigeria as a WHO ECAM facilitator. Next slide. And so these are actually the performance, the individual performance of the first 12 malaria microscopists. There were 24. We group them 12-12 so that it's because the slides cannot accommodate it. So you can see their pre-ECAM score. It's those that are level 3, level 2 actually made level 1. And actually that validates that yes, our training is of high standard. So we can even boast that if you are level 3 in Nigeria, you may actually properly become level 1 when you sit for WHO ECAM. Next slide. Remember, we had 7 that had level 4. Unfortunately, in ECAM, we only had 3 that had level 4. So, and here you can see that out of the 3 that had level 4 in ECAM, also had level 4 in NCAM. But unfortunately, we have one of the level 2 actually that dropped. But when we actually did the root cause analysis, we actually find out that it was actually level 1 in detection, it was actually level 1 in cessation, but unfortunately, his parasite density was poor, and there are 3 indicators that you must be graded with. If one of the indicator actually falls below the minimum requirement, unfortunately, it will consider that you have dropped. That is, how quality or how high the standard of NCAM and ECAM is. Next slide. Okay, this is just the ECAM where we presented for 24 participants to validate the malaria microscopy training in Nigeria. So these are the participants and the facilitator for that ECAM. Next slide. Now, I need to talk about the NCAM. In April 14, 2002, the NLP of Federal Ministry of Health inaugurated the National Core Group of 40 malaria microscopies. So these are the first 40 malaria microscopies that was certified by WHO. And the inauguration actually brought about the establishment of the National Competency Assessment for Malaria Microscopy Program, which is the NCAM. The NCAM now becomes the platform for competence for both private and public laboratory practitioner that does malaria microscopy. ECAM is expensive. ECAM is about $3,000. And because it is not feasible for you, it is not feasible for any program to continue to spend $3,000 on an individual. And it was one of the reasons that necessitated the WHO recommendation that once a country can boast of 10 to 12 level 1 and level 2, you should go on and set up the NCAM program, and Nigeria set up an NCAM program in 14th of April last year. And by November 2022, the first ECAM was held. 12 participants were invited for that NCAM. We had only 10 actually that could make it, and we had that NCAM. Next slide. So this is the pictures of the participants that attended the first NCAM in Nigeria. I was actually the NCAM lead facilitator for the country. Next slide. And this is the first NCAM results in Nigeria. In ECAM and NCAM, we do something differently. And one of the things that we do differently is that if you do not want your name to be published, then we'll ask you that, well, maybe it's better we are not ready to work, because we need to identify those competent microscopists so that they can be better deployed in the Nigerian programs. So ECAM results are always made public for programs so that you can know where you can identify those competent microscopies that will help the cause of the country programs. So these are the names. We had 10 participants. Out of the 10 participants, we had 7 of them here made it. 3 of them did not make it. And the 3 that did not make it actually used this ENCAM as a preparatory certification for ECAM. The following week, they actually used the ENCAM as to prepare themselves for ECAM. And they didn't make it, they were level 4, but they could actually locate where their problems were. Their problem mostly was in parasite density. That was what made them level 4. And we worked on their parasite density. And all the 3 of them went for ECAM the following week, and they came back with level 2. Next slide. For malaria microscopy certification, we need to acquaint ourselves with the ECAM and ECAM accreditation level. For you to be level 1, you must have parasite detection greater than 90, special detection greater than 90, parasite counting greater than 50. Your parasite detection will be done with 21 slides. Your special identification will be done with 42 slides. And your parasite counting will be done, parasite density elimination will be done with 14 slides. Overall, you have 56 slides. Level 2, you must score greater than 80% in detection and speciation, and greater than 40%, 40 to 49 in parasite density. For level 3, you must score greater than 70% in detection and speciation, and 30 to 39% in parasite density. Once you are less than 70% in both detection and speciation, and less than 30% in parasite counting, the WHO recommendation is that you should not be allowed to do malaria diagnosis because your results cannot be trusted. Level 3 is the minimum requirement that is allowed. We hope that as the level 3 continue to practice, the level 3 will later become level 2 or level 1. Level 1 and level 2 can lead a malaria microscopy training as part of the requirement and recommendation of WHO, but level 3 cannot lead a training. But level 3 can serve as a support staff to level 1 and level 2 in training, working under the supervision of the level 1 and level 2. Next slide. This is the organization of the 56 standard slide panel I talked about of ECAM and NCAM. You have a negative and the positive slide have to be balanced because many participants that are not good can just write positive from the beginning of the slide to the end of the slide. So if you write positive from the beginning to the end, or you write negative from the beginning to the end, the best you will score would be less than 60% based on this arrangement. And for parasite density, there are 14 slides, and these are the density for the 14 slides. You must have 6 slides with parasite density between 200 and 500 parasite per microliter. We call it low density. 6 slides with parasite density of 500 to 2000. We call it medium density. We have 2 slides with parasite density between 40 to 100,000, which we call high density. Next slide. And now, I want us to now appreciate what malaria competence has done for the country. Remember, I told you that the WHO Afro-ECAM commenced in the Afro region of WHO in 2009. And by 2010, I actually attended the first certification. And in 2010, there was Global Fund Round 8. With Global Fund Round 8, we were given the mandate to train at least 1 medical lab scientist in all the 18 states in the southern part of Nigeria. And of course, we did the Global Fund training by June 30. And I think by July 7, I was in Nairobi for the WHO certification. And the reason was we need to get an external quality control for the training that we have done to actually know whether the country is in the right course, whether the country actually has placed the training in the right person. I mean, has placed the training, you understand, with the right organization. So as a technical lead for that training activity, so I was actually sent, you understand, for me to be QC to determine, you understand, the Nigerian training program at Global Fund Round 8. And of course, that was the first time, and I became level 1, and that gave us confidence. And the products of that Global Fund training, the level 1, level 2, level 3 we got in that Global Fund training, were now deployed for the National Malaria Indicator Survey of 2010 to do the malaria microscopy reading in Andy Center of Excellence for malaria microscopy. And the prevalence of Nigeria was found to be 42%. And 5 years later, when the National Malaria Indicator Survey was repeated, by then, of course, we have improved the critical masses of the competent malaria microscopists in the country. And of course, it was also read at Andy Center of Excellence, and the quality assurance done at the Institute of Tropical Disease and Prevention in Calabar, which the lead microscopy then there was in level 2. Our prevalence came to 27%. By the National Democratic Health Survey of 2018, the prevalence in Nigeria came to 23%. Now, between 2018 and 2021, there had not been much progress, partly because of COVID, because COVID actually prevented some of the interventions that has been put in place. But of course, we now have competent microscopists in the country, and there's only competent microscopists actually that are deployed to read malaria microscopy slides of any program of national magnitude in Nigeria, and the prevalence was 22%. And of course, we can see the trend, we can understand the trend, we can understand our data because our slides were read by competent malaria microscopists in the country that are unofficially nationally certified because we trained them. And now we now have the national certification inaugurated officially to recognize every competent malaria microscopist in Nigeria. So and that is what competency has done for us. So if you look at next slide, please. Before I conclude and I say my closing message, in case management of malaria, the best way to go is to only allow competent malaria microscopists to do malaria microscopy. If we are looking for new vaccines that will save our children, that will save our pregnant women, of course, how do we ascertain the efficacy of that vaccine? Or is it a new drug? How do we ascertain the efficacy of that new drug? We can see what incompetent microscopists did to drug trial in the early 2000s. So the best way and the most rational way to do actually is to allow competent malaria microscopy to do malaria diagnosis. Then for any of the interventions that's been put in place, be it seasonal malaria chemoprevention, be it intermittent preventive treatment in pregnant women, be it intermittent preventive treatment in school-age children, be it post-discharge chemoprevention in severe malaria patients, be it mass drug administration and elimination, whatever intervention that is being put in place, how do you monitor the efficacy of this intervention? It is by malaria microscopy competence. And I want to sound this warning that if we are not careful, we may lose it again. RDT has come, and a lot of our labs are beginning to depend solely on RDT. Remember, HRP2 deletions in some of the mutated parasites is beginning to actually discredit RDT. In Latin America, some of the histidine-rich protein RDT are no longer being used because they couldn't detect the malaria parasite again, because for survival, the malaria parasite has mutated and they have deleted the genetic codes that code for HRP2 and HRP3. And of course, when we do HRP-based RDT, when we use them for malaria diagnosis, we're actually testing for the HRP2. But when the parasite has deleted the genetic code that code for them by mutation, of course, you do your RDT will be negative, and the parasite will continue to swim in the patient's blood and will continue to kill our patients. We should be careful. We should be very, very, very careful. The alternative RDT we have is the enzymatic RDT, the PLDH RDT, and the iodase RDT. But till date, none of those RDT, at least as of the last WHO World Report of 2022, none of the PLDH and iodase RDT has been pre-qualified by WHO. So, I'm starting this warning. Let us take malaria competence serious so that the fate that befell chloroquine will not befell our artemisinin combination therapy. Malaria microscopy competence has proven to be effective. Only competent malaria microscopy should do malaria microscopy. The minimum requirement for malaria microscopy is level 3, but our target should be a minimum of level 2. World malaria burden and death has dropped by almost half since the Kuala Lumpur workshop in 2005 that adopted malaria competence. Malaria microscopy remains the gold standard, only in the hands of an expert or quality assured microscopy, which is level 1. Countries should adopt malaria microscopy competence because it is the most rational way to follow. Malaria in a year kills 6 times of what COVID-19 kills in 3 years in Nigeria. Next slide. I want to acknowledge the following organization: for their support in my career, WHO Afro, WHO Nigeria, NMP of the Federal Ministry of Health Abuja, and the Center of Excellence for Malaria Microscopy. That was where I started my career for, and it was by the grant of Andy that I became what I am today. Watery Program Kisumu, that was my alma mater, where I was trained by WHO TDR grant. Watery Program Nigeria, my partner in Nigeria, and the baby of watery products in Kisumu. USAID PMI for also giving me opportunities. Global Fund, Amherst University, where the WHO ECAM is being held. Nigerian Institute of Medical Research. They also give me the platform to always organize malaria microscopy training. And also finally, I want to acknowledge DHA Lab Academy for giving me this opportunity to speak to you Nigerians. Thank you. God bless you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Jide, for this great time we've had with you in the last over an hour. If you ask me, I would say that our webinar was an advocacy for malaria competence and a drive to get all of us to be conscious of malaria competency. Every one of us who are working in any hospital and we are malaria, we have the privilege to work on the microscope on the malaria bench, and have not pursued or made any attempts to pursue malaria competency, and not exactly doing good service, to the people. Like I said earlier, I've been privileged to be trained by Mr. Jide in NIMA in 2018. I also had the privilege to be trained in where he called his alma mater in Andy. So I think that even at the barest minimum, one of the first things we should begin to pursue is malaria microscopy training. One is actually going to happen from next week in NIMA. I'm not advertising, they didn't pay me to do that, but I think I could just tell us here, colleagues. Our time is fast spent, but I think usually I find that we get a lot of information when we look at questions. So we'll take just a few of the questions. So doctors keep stressing that patients with fever, but MP negative microscopically and by RTT, when given malaria drugs, get better. So what do you have to say about this? I think this is a simple one. Yes, sir. Did you get the question, sir?
Yes, I got it. Yeah, just as I said earlier, there are so many things that could give you fever. And I'm sure the only scientific way to prove that you have malaria actually is to do a test. And I want to say that a day before yesterday, I was febrile and I was actually feeling very sick. Of course, I do know that I've undergone so much stress because I have so many things on my hand. I wasn't sleeping well, but I needed to be sure. Is it malaria or is it stress? And because I advocate for testing, I will never take anti-malaria without testing. And I decided to do an RDT yesterday, and the RDT was negative. And I decided to sleep well and drink a lot of water, and I became well. And I will tell you that for those of us that are scientists, RDT is like on the counter drug. I mean, it's like on the counter drug now. RDT is a point of care that everybody is trained on how to use it. So every medical practitioner, you can also have RDT in your home. Endeavor to do your test, even if it is by RDT, if it's not by microscope. You don't have facility for a competent microscopy, do your audit. Once you do your audit, you understand, you realize what is wrong with you. And once you hold your drug and take water and sleep well, you will become better. Stress can give you fever. High blood pressure can give you fever. Viral infection, flu, that are self-limiting, of course, you know. Even COVID is self-limiting. If it doesn't kill you, you understand? Most viral infections are self-limiting. Even COVID is self-limiting. And that is why we are not dying in this part of the country. So, and if you actually drink water, rest well, you understand, you actually become better. So that is not an evidence that if the patient gets well with the drug, even if you didn't give the patient well, the patient actually drinks water, the patient will get well. I see it as coincidental. So the right thing to do, if you cannot do a microscopy, then do an auditing. The only exception is that if the fever persists after an audit, and the fever persists and the audit is negative, then you can now call for microscopy. The only problem with the microscopy is that if that person is not competent, you will not be getting the right results. Because the most popular audit in the country is the HRP2-based audit. But remember that there is this less than 5% of PM, P. malariae, and P. ovale that we have in Nigeria that is capable of causing fever, which your HRP2-based auditing will not detect. So when your audit is negative, repeat your microscopy. If it is negative, please hold the drug. You don't need it. So that you not precipitate selective pressure and resistance. Thank you. Over.
All right, sir. So this person wants to know, he said, in a comparative order, which gives best clinical information? QBC, RDT, microscopy.
Every one of them has their own advantages and disadvantages. Microscopy first, RDT second, then QBC last. Microscopy first because it's the gold standard, although it requires competence. So your microscopy in a competent hand is your best tool. And for you to assess the efficiency or sensitivity and specificity of RDT and even QBC, it is with microscopy. So if I'm going to assess this other two, it is with microscopy. The major problems with QBC is that patients with hemoglobinopathies and some form of genetic deformities or disorder, we have nuclear speck running around in their blood systems. These nuclear specks will take up acrolein orange and they will fluoresce like malaria parasites. And it takes an expert fluorescent microscopist to be able to differentiate between malaria and those nucleic speck that will give false positive in QBC. That is the problem of QBC. However, malaria RDT is not as sensitive as microscopy. The detection limit of microscopy is between 5 to 20 parasites per micrometer. That is for microscopy. 5 to about, let me say 5 to about 20 parasites per micrometer. Whereas RDT actually is 100 parasite per microliter. But that is not to say that RDT cannot pick 50 parasite per microliter or 25 parasite per microliter. At least I've used RDT that I try to compare. In Nigeria, they actually pick 25 parasite per microliter. But the threshold for you to say yes, this particular RDT meets the minimum WHO requirement for performance in sensitivity is the ability of that malaria RDT ability to pick 100 parasites per microliter. And you know 100 parasites per microliter, if you are counting against 200 WBC, that's just about 2 or 3 parasites. And that 2 or 3 parasites, even at times, and the detection limit, you understand, for an untrained microscopist is 500 parasites per microliter. If you have not been trained in malaria microscopy, even the trained malaria microscopy, sensitivity of malaria microscopy begin to come down from 500 parasite per microliter downward. And that is the fact. Sorry. And that is why we said that in the absence of competent malaria microscopy, you'll be wasting your time using incompetent malaria microscopy. Better you use RDT because we are sure that the minimum requirement for that RDT, you understand, is 100 parasite per microliter, and it may be possible that that RDT is even picking 25, even picking 50 parasite per microliter. And in a study of one of my fellowship students, we actually evaluated 10 malaria RDT in the market. One of my last fellowship students. And all the 10. And of course, you know that the detection limit is 100, but evaluation is done at 200. Because WHO have to give a gap of 100 so that good products, you understand, will not actually be destroyed or will not be discarded. Yes, you must be able to pick 100, but not testing and evaluation is being done minimum at about 200. Understand? So at 200, virtually all the kits actually pick at 200. At 100, virtually all the kits actually pick at 100. But at 50, only 3 picks at 50. But the fact now is, how many microscopists can even pick parasites below 100 parasites per microliter? And that is why we say that RDT is as good as an expert microscopist. Over, thank you.
All right, thank you. Somebody is also asking how much the NCAM program costs and how does the microscope affect the competency of a microscopist?
Now, for the price of the NCAM is about $3,000. But because the NCAM is being done in Nigeria, prices has not been fixed. I'm not in the position to fix the price, which is only MNSCN that is in the position to fix such prices. For NCAM, but if a group, probably an association of medical lab scientists, for example, in a state have about 12 participants and want NCAM done, what they need to do is either to write NMEP, to write Dr. Agbolahan or Saretin NMEP, who is in charge of the program, or to communicate with me. And of course, we can now discuss if they can provide 12 quality microscopes, we can actually come to the States to actually get it done for them, because it will be cheaper for us to move the facilitator to your site than for all of you to pay down to Abuja. That is a scenario. Another scenario is also that, of course, the council may advertise for it, or perhaps if you continue putting your name down and we can have 20 participants, we can now agree on a date. The council will now agree with you on a date. They will come actually and run it. And with that, you understand, it will also be cheaper. You understand? But personally, my view, I don't think the income will be more than 250,000. That's personally my view. Then for the quality of microscope, yes, the quality of microscope will greatly affect the performance. Your microscope must be very, very good. And this is very, very important. For example, if you have been using your microscope for some time and it's not very, very clear, and you do not want to change the microscope, if it's still in good condition, you can change your times 100. As a matter of fact, I change my times 100 once or twice every year because I do a lot of malaria microscopy. So I change my times 100 twice, depending once or twice every year, so that I can have a clearer picture of my parasite. So my quality of microscope will affect your performance. Over.
Okay, then. All right. So, because of time, we want to end right now. But what we want to do is, if your questions weren't taken, we formed a WhatsApp group for this training. So kindly just ask the same questions in the WhatsApp group. So I would organize it and send it also to Mr. Bamiro. He'll help look at it and give us answers to it. All your questions, please, let it not end at this point, even though the Zoom recording is able to still give us access to this, and then we'll see how we can extract it. But to be safer, you can just drop it there. If you want other information about Mr. Bamiro, just chat me also in that same WhatsApp group. I believe you have the link. You have my phone number. Just reach me directly so that Mr. Bamiro can rest. Thank you, Mr. Bamiro. Of course, I am not disappointed. You delivered like you would always deliver, and I'm sure certain people's eyes have been opened, and clearly we now know what we should look for. And like I said earlier, I'm sure one of the basic levels we should start, apart from the microscopy or whatever we learned from our internship and in school, is to do the basic malaria microscopy course. Like I said earlier, NIMA will be doing one starting from the 1st of May, all right? And to tell you that my organization that is always in pursuance of quality, that's AHA Clinics Academy, we just started AHA Clinics rather. We just started a clinic in Lagos, and the scientist who is sent there to head that place, one of his first trainings is to go and do a malaria microscopy training. So you'll see him in the training in Lagos. So please, let's begin to put resources together and reach out. And I'm sure Mr. Bamiro is a father of so many. He'll be willing to mentor as much as we're willing to learn and reach out to him. Thank you so very much for your time. We appreciate this value that you have added to our learning this evening. We are grateful, sir.
Thank you, Obina.
All right. And for us at the AJ Lab Academy, we want to say thank you for still believing in us and joining us again this evening. We'll still be coming your way with yet another educative program by the end, by next month. So I don't know if you have any final words to say so that we call it an evening.
Well, my final word is, it's like an advocacy that if you're a medical lab scientist, please, we want you to stop this scanty, few, 1+ way of reporting. There are 3 indicators that are required for reporting malaria diagnosis, according to the national guideline. The 3 indicators are the species, the stage, and the parasite density. Please, Nigeria has abolished the blood system as far back as 2011. And I will actually be happy if every laboratory practitioner begin to conform with the national guideline of reporting malaria diagnosis. For many of us that want to have a copy of the national guideline, I will send it to Obina, and Obina, I will send a soft copy to Obina, probably to the platform. Obina can actually put it on the platform and you can download it. Please send that national guideline to as many medical lab scientists you can send it to as many nurses you can send it to, and to as many doctors you can send it to. This document is for all medical practitioners. Thank you everyone for your time, and I hope to see you another time again. Over.
All right, thank you very much. And it's good night from us here. Thank you so much, sir. Rest well. Have a great night. Have a great night, everybody. Yeah. Bye.
Good night, everybody.